Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
This is our GMC professional grade tweet of the night, and this is what Chris was alluding to just moments ago. Ray Fittipaldo talked to Jaylen Warren today, said Steelers Jaylen Warren on George Pickens. If I was in that position, I would have blocked for him. So that's telling. You know, and I talked to Allen Robinson, Chris, and, you know, he had some telling things to say basically to kind of sum it up that, you know, he needs to basically grow up and learn that you're a football player and it's about winning games. So, you know, we'll have that interview coming up at 11 o'clock. But it doesn't seem like that this, you know, sat well with the guys in the locker room. And I think, you know, maybe the offensive linemen, and I'm just throwing this out here, the guys that normally are blocking the trenches all the time are probably the ones that took offense to this more than anyone else.
What, because he said he was trying to make a business decision for his own health, and those guys have a chance of getting rolled up on every play? Yeah, I mean, listen, I think one thing, two things can be true, actually. Let me restate this. Things are going very bad for the Steelers right now, and I do think the team's culture is in a bit of disarray. And I think those are both big reflections on Mike Tomlin. But I think some people would have you believe that, like, every single guy in there disrespects Tomlin. I don't think that's the case. I think he's got the keen and you know, kind of attuned ear of probably 85 to 90% of that locker room. The problem is the 10 or so percent that he doesn't have the ear of are loud, they're demonstrative, and they're guys who are usually in prominent roles. George Pickens, somewhat recently Deontay Johnson. Najee Harris occasionally pops off and says something that you probably wonder if he should say. And so when some of your highest profile players are saying some of the things that they've said, doing some of the things that they've done, it really creates the outward appearance that things are crumbling quickly. They might still be, but I think it's actually worse than it looks in terms of sheer numbers, just because of who the guys are who are unhappy and acting out.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I'm going to go the opposite stance. I don't think it is as bad as it appears to be over there. I mean, I'm over there a lot. I think, you know, if they could put together a good offensive plan and, you know, maybe had an offensive coordinator where you could score more points, that's where I think that it set them back. You know, I mean, you have to. If they were scoring 30 points a game, Chris, I don't think we would have this. But it's Matt Canada's offense, and he hired Matt Canada in the first place. He promoted Matt Canada, you know, and he has the conservative sort of overarching approach. He helped draft Kenny Pickett, who I don't think is the answer. I don't think there is a good quarterback on this roster, and so you might want to look at things and say, well, if this, and this were better. Well, most of them do trace back to the head coach in one way, shape, or form. All right, let's go to John in Lower Borough. How you doing, John?
Hi, Richie. Hi, Chris. I have a couple comments. You look back at Tomlin's tenure here, he's had numerous issues with players, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, a list could go on and on. And besides that, you look at the Baltimore head coach and John Harbaugh, he's coached the same amount of years as Tomlin in one place, and he's never had this kind of issue, never had issues with making excuses for, you know, people getting hurt, and they keep playing hard.
He's had some issues in Baltimore.
You know,
I wouldn't paint it like John Harbaugh has had the smoothest ride there. He's had one or two really bad seasons. Lamar Jackson saved his job. Ray Lewis, for crying out loud, was a guy he inherited. I don't think Ray Lewis is anyone's idea of a saint other than maybe Ray Lewis. So I wouldn't say John Harbaugh has had a den full of angels over there, but
I don't think Tomlin makes excuses for players. Do you?
You do or don't think he does?
I don't.
I think he shields his players in a way that often frustrates people on the outside who would like to see him get a pound of flesh sometimes in the media from these guys, and I just don't think that's his style. And I think the problem people have with that is, like today on Pickens, he says he'll play, his work ethic's not a problem, and then he's asked, is there going to be discipline? And he says, if there is, it's not going to be any I'll tell you about publicly.
Yeah.
And people just do not like the idea that they don't know what happens. Is he saying anything to Pickens? Because it creates in their minds this idea that maybe he's not saying anything or doing anything. You know what I mean?
Well, I think
and
he is.
So
That's the Steelers' way.
People want that outward appearance.
They want to keep everything in-house. They want to protect everything. And that's the way they do things over there. So I'm sure there'll be some kind of punishment that we'll find out about in a couple weeks, Dell, what happened. But, nothing
I don't know about
major.
that, Richie. I don't know if there's going to be some kind of punishment. I guess I do reject the notion that Mike Tomlin, among the 3 coaches that have been here for for the last 50 years, is somehow singular in his inability to control his players. Chuck Noll had major incidents happen under his watch that, if they had happened in the social media era, would have dominated the headlines. Guys firing at a police helicopter, things like that. Bill Cowher did not have a smooth track record. Bill Cowher himself was a loose cannon at times emotionally. I think Mike Tomlin's the detriment here, the thing he's got to fight against is he coaches in the 24/7 news cycle era. He coaches in the social media era. Everything he says is going to get parsed by people like me and others down to the last syllable, and that just is what it is for him. But I hardly think that the last 2 Steelers coaches before him just coached teams full of choir boys year after year.
And sometimes you got to take a chance on some of these kind of players to win games, and he's in the winning business. Let's go out to Bob. Bob from Monroeville. How you doing, Bob?
Good. Hey, the Steelers aren't going to go to the playoffs. We know that.
Well, yeah, look, Bob, I agree with you. I mean, it's a very small chance, but they need to win this game to have any kind of chance left. Like we said last week, was a must-win because they'd lose so many tiebreakers right now. Yeah, there's the door is slightly ajar, but I would say it's slightly closed. I would look at it the pessimist way.
I mean, I think if you go by the New York Times playoffs simulator, you just submit 3 wins for the Steelers down the stretch. Excuse me, Richie, for the imaginary bug on my face there. I think if they go 10-7 and win out, they're still only like a 75% shot to make the playoffs. And that's like the New York Times' little machine there running about 60,000 simulations of what will happen. So it's by no means a lock, even if they do win out. They're not even close to one of the 7 best teams in the AFC, first of all. They don't deserve to be in there. They would almost certainly get bounced in spectacular, ugly fashion if they did get in. I do think on some level they need to have this thing completely crash and burn all the way to 7-10 as just sort of a here's your evidence. This is a come to Jesus crossroads moment for the franchise and for Tomlin.
Yeah, I said the worst thing that could happen, I think I told you this last week, was they lose these 2 games and they win the next 2 games with Kenny Pickett, the Seattle and Baltimore game, and then everyone thinks that it's fixed. They're going to be better next year, and they don't have these glaring holes. I'm with you on that one. Let's go out to Tony in the Hill District. How you doing, Tony?
How you doing, Rich? I want to say everybody was calling for Matt Canada's job. It was Matt Canada's fault. It was Matt Canada's fault. Now, they fired the guy, okay, and you bring in this other offensive coach, and you're still getting the same outcome. Why fire the man when it's just really your quarterback and your receivers that's just not on the same page?
That's a good question. You had to do something to make the fans happy. It just isn't better. And they didn't go out and get any guys. They just elevated 2 guys that were in that locker room already.
The scheme is laughably bad. It's a rudimentary scheme, even though there are guys open more often than maybe some people would have you believe, and the quarterbacks are responsible for that part. The scheme is just still not a good scheme. I'm sure it would look better if Patrick Mahomes was running it, or even Josh Allen was running it, or probably almost anybody else in the NFL was running it. That doesn't mean I think it would necessarily look good. There are just very few easy wins for receiver and quarterback in this offense.